Hey there. I wanted to go on ahead and speak to the Norfolk Southern train derailment up in East Palestine, Ohio. A lot's been unfolding over the last several weeks in regards to this whole thing. Obviously, initially it was just oh my gosh, look at this catastrophe. And now we've gotten to a point where we have regulatory agencies actively covering up on behalf of the rail industry, essentially. And there's a lot of misinformation and fake science being passed off as proof that things are fine and everything else. And I wanted to get into or wade into this because what is being done by the EPA or what's being reported really honestly is shameful. From the EPA standpoint, it's absolutely shameful. People are not doing their jobs. They're actively spreading misinformation. For instance, recently we had an EPA administrator going out and telling people not to drink their well water until it's been tested, and all sorts of bizarre and silly things. So with this train derailment, let's just go on ahead and get right into it. When they decided to do that controlled burn of the vinyl chloride gas, vinyl chloride is the monomer for the polymer polyvinyl chloride, thus the poly part of it. So they decided to go on ahead and burn this stuff off, and in doing so, they released things like hydrogen chloride, phosgene gas, which is a gas we used in World War I to basically suffocate people to death, and all sorts of things, right? Well, all of this stuff is being released in this giant plume over the town, and as air does what it does, it obviously moved. Now, some of these are volatile organic compounds that are going to be volatile in terms of they're going to be gaseous, but as these things start to cool in our atmosphere, they will rain out of the atmosphere. They will become heavier or denser than the air, the column that they're floating in, and they will fall. Well, they're not going to do that right at the exact location where the derailment and fire is, right? Air moves, hot air moves up, and then it moves laterally. So all of the contaminants that we would see from this particular instance is not going to be at the rail yard. It's going to be all over East Palestine. It's going to be in the neighboring counties and in the county that East Palestine sits in. Well, why am I bringing this up? Well, if you go to the EPA's own website, they've set up a monitoring and sampling page. Basically, it's the East Palestine, Ohio Train Derailment Emergency Response page. And they're giving you updated information on all of their testing and everything that they're doing. Well, when you go to their website, you can actually click on the tests that they have done, and you can and see what it is that they're testing for and everything else. Well, okay, let's think about this. We have a giant plume of toxic gas with particulates coming out of the air as they cool, and it's sprinkling all over potentially a multi-county area. Well, it's definitely going to be multi-county because East Palestine sits right on the edge of a county, so it's definitely multi-county. Well, let's go ahead and take a look at the soil samples that have been done on behalf of Norfolk Southern. I should say it's not the EPA that did most of the sampling thus far, or at least up until very recently. They've been relying on the same company who falsified test data during the BP Deepwater Horizon oil spill. We all remember that, right? Well, Norfolk Southern they hired them. And that's who the EPA was originally using the test results to report for. But let's go ahead and take a look at the sampling data that they have for soil. When you look at the map, you'll see that 4 soil samples and 1 sediment sample has been taken. And actually, look, they added another one down on Sulphur Run. So actually, I take that back. There's a sediment sample now down in Sulphur Run. Okay, that's down in the creek less than a mile away. Okay. So why is this an issue? Why am I bringing this to your attention? Well, kind of already probably assume after having listened to the first 4 minutes of this video, well, why are they only taking soil samples at the crash? Why aren't we taking it at playgrounds where kids are rolling around in the actual sediment, the dirt, the sand, everything else that's in a playground? They're rolling around in it, right? Why aren't we sampling the soil there? What about our agricultural areas surrounding the East Palestine city? Or in the county? What about all the agriculture areas there where your food is grown? Not seeing any testing out there. What about in schools where kids are actually out there playing and everything else? No testing there. What about people's backyards where they let their kids and their pets go outside and play and run around and roll in the sediment there? Any soil testing? None. None whatsoever. Now, maybe they have plans to do it, but the longer you wait, the less likely you're going to find certain things, right? So, okay. Let's maybe give them the benefit of the doubt. They weren't ready. It's only been 3 weeks, right? Almost a whole month. I mean, that's barely enough time to pull some tests out of a cabinet and get out there and just drive around and test. What about the water testing? Well, again, we're talking about a big plume of gas that's going to be raining out of the sky, and it's going to be obviously falling into the streamways. But it's also really, if you want to find contamination, you don't want to go to a body of moving water, because the body of moving water, unless it's raining and you actually have contaminants and particulates washing into the water stream and then into the streams, you're not going to find contamination in a streamway 3 weeks after the event occurred. All of the water that's going to be in the town while you're testing 3 weeks later came from another city or another state. You are not getting stream water that is running over the watershed at this point of the area in question. So testing waterways, i.e. water that moves, testing streams and rivers, you might be able to pick a little bit up of something maybe in the sediment, maybe, but that's not where you're going to test. You want to test in ponds. You want to test in lakes. And guess what? There's several in the area in question that they could test. Why would you test there? Well, number one, that water is not moving to a new location. So any of the contaminants that were there that haven't broken down already will be in that standing body of water. But why is it a standing body of water? Well, where's that water coming from? It's being fed by the streams. So you would expect, if you want to find a for sure positive test of this contaminant being somewhere, you would go to standing bodies of water that are being fed by the streams that were contaminated three weeks ago, and then poured their contamination into these bodies of water. That's where you would start looking. And isn't that where all the fish and the ecosystem, the surrounding ecosystem, the standing bodies of water are just as important. So are we looking actively for contamination? We're not looking anywhere in the county for soil contamination. We're testing only moving bodies of water. Or the other place that we're testing, and I have to give a shout out to the EPA administrator who went out on the media yesterday and started basically, his name was Michael Reagan, saying don't drink the well water until it's been tested. Let's think about what wells are. Wells are areas where we draw water from. Basically, you have rock that's porous underneath the surface of the earth, limestone and sandstone. They hold water. And you can think about taking, say, a 50-pound rock and sticking it on your chest and how much pressure that is. Well, when you have 50 to 100 feet of limestone and it's all water-laden, that's a lot of pressure, and it squeezes down. And then we drill a hole, and now there's no pressure where that hole is. So all the water is squeezed out of the rock and into that hole. Well, that hole is covered up, obviously. It's not open to the open air. This isn't old school like we're bringing up a bucket of water. It's sealed, and you have a pipe that goes down with a pump, and it sucks water out of that hole. It's completely sealed from the outside. There's no way that airborne contaminants are going to get in the well water that people are drinking. None whatsoever. So why, as an EPA administrator, Mr. Michael Reagan, would you be misinforming the public not to drink something that should be completely safe unless it's been tested by a company hired by the rail industry? That's the question I want to know. That doesn't make any sense. Either you don't understand basic science, something that anybody with a water well already knows, or you understand the science and you are actively spreading misinformation, putting smoke and mirrors out there to get us to look at a shiny object while you do something over here off screen. That's what it appears to me, because there's absolutely no reason for you to warn people about this. What you're probably going to be doing is creating a situation where people are getting a false sense of security because you're testing things that could not have in any way, shape, or been contaminated, and you're using that as a proxy to say it's safe when you didn't do your job and tested the things you should have been testing. That, I think, is what's probably going on. And here's the thing to consider. The EPA makes their little public statements to try and make it seem like they're doing their job. Yesterday, they came out with an announcement that they're going to put Norfolk Southern 100% on the hook for all cleanup efforts. But if you're not looking for the areas that got dirty, well, then you have a much smaller area you have to clean up, and that's a much smaller impact on the finances of the rail industry that caused this problem. The rail industry that cut their workforce by a third. The rail industry that refuses to give their workers paid days off, or sick days, or just days off in general. The same rail industry that actively punishes their workers for holding the rail industry to the current regulations. That rail industry, you are letting them off the hook. You are publishing data to show things that, to show that things are safe when you actively don't have the data to be able to say that yet. You are using the wrong measurements, the wrong metrics to prove that things are safe for these people. And you wonder why the public has completely lost all faith in any of our government agencies. This smells like a corporate cover-up. And I think we're all actively watching it because the EPA on their own website is showing where the bodies are buried. They're looking in all the wrong places, and they're sharing that data with you to give you a false sense of security. I'll shut up as soon as you start doing the actual soil tests and water tests that matter. This has got to stop. These people at the EPA are charged with protecting the environment, and they're doing everything they can to renege on those responsibilities. Remember, we approved the bivalent booster from the FDA on the trial data of 8 mice, and it didn't even show a reduction in disease or death. All we did was use antibody titers. When you change the goalpost and you use metrics that have no bearing on the effectiveness of whatever it is you're trying to prove, you don't have good science, you have misinformation. And the EPA, and everybody who's parroting what the EPA is saying, is actively spreading misinformation the same way they covered for the FDA when we passed the bivalent booster. What's going on, guys? Is anybody going to step up to the plate and start doing something about this, or are we just going to keep letting it happen? Environmental disaster after environmental disaster. This is not the only train derailment we've had in 2023. Train derailments are on the upswing. And we just had President Biden and Congress force a deal down on all the rail unions, basically not giving them what they were asking for, time off. And we're going to continue to proliferate these issues for the foreseeable future. The rail industry is not spending any of the record profits to fix any of the safety issues with the rail system. They're buying back stock. They're giving stock dividends to all of their shareholders. But they're not investing back in their system and making it better or safer or more efficient. They're not hiring the people they need to hire, just like the airline industry, overselling tickets when they know they don't have the ability to actually put planes in the air to cover the tickets they're selling. We're just letting these companies, these corporations run amok, and it's putting us basically in harm's way. At this point in time, train derailments are guaranteed to happen, and they're going to keep happening. And you know what is carried on trains? All of our raw materials for manufacturing. Things like anhydrous ammonia. Anhydrous ammonia, you knock one of those over, and that's a gaseous, wonderful, deadly chemical. It's going to suffocate everybody in that gas cloud. Chlorine gas, same thing. Bitumen, the stuff that we were trying to pump through pipelines. Oh, that stuff, when we actually get leaks on that, that's so packed full of different hydrocarbons and nasty chemicals that it completely toxifies whatever it comes in contact with. It's not like oil. Oil's a hell of a lot easier to clean up. The things that we ship on our rail yards are immediately deadly. Oftentimes, again, anhydrous ammonia is a perfect example. They are immediately deadly to the surrounding area. We're lucky when these things derail outside of town, but how many towns do they go through carrying deadly, hazardous, gaseous materials that could wipe towns out in minutes? We need to do something very, very quickly. We need to right this ship because things are not improving. They are getting worse.